Hi everyone, this is Abel. Welcome back to my channel. Today I have a bunch of really cool science fiction and fantasy books I want to talk about. We have reading updates, reviews, writing updates. This is going to be fun. Let's get ready. But before we start, remember that if you enjoy science fiction and fantasy books, this is the perfect place for you. So if you want to see more videos like this, please consider subscribing, leave a like, share this video. Thank you. The first book I want to talk about is Discovery by J.AJ Minton. J.AJ is for John, Amy, and Jacob, who are from the YouTube and BookTube channel Talking Story. It is a very nice channel, one of my favorite about science fiction and fantasy books, both traditionally published and self-published. And if you don't know that channel, I actually urge you to subscribe and follow. It has a very nice vibe, very good recommendations, really interesting and insightful reviews, and actually the back and forth dynamics between John and Jacob make it really unique because they're really different, but also they have really interesting and contrasting tapes at times about the books that they read. And they also have a really nice Discord community. They do buddy reads and all this stuff. But this book is what I find really interesting. It is a family endeavor, because the entire family is working around the production of this one, which is can be described as science fiction, maybe Eldritch vibes, a little bit like Lovecraft, because it is about a large cast of characters, but the central premise is about the discovery of recordings about a deep sea expedition that turned into tragedy, and somehow the decision to broadcast what was recorded in those tapes, those data, has incredibly different and often horrific consequences. There's also a really good, a nice and really atmospheric booktube videos, a book trailer in their channel. So I'll leave all the links in the description down below. We have the cover here, which is really atmospheric and give you all the vibes on this story, which will be probably a mystery, but also an adventure. And the name, it tells you that there's a lot of unpacked about what happens actually in that expedition and the consequences of the decision to use those data and broadcast them. So yeah, I'm really curious about it. This should be out in May. You should absolutely check out the channel and possibly put this book in your TBR and your wishlist too. Now let's talk about an author that has been on my radar for quite a while, but I never had the chance to read anything by him, until he decided to reach to me and kindly offer the chance to read a couple of digital arcs for his books. And of course, I think I will start with the first one that he published a couple of years ago, which is The Legend of Black Jack. And this author we are talking about is A.R. Witham. The Legend of Black Jack has all of those vibes that you could find in the classic adventures from the 90s, 80s and 90s, especially if you are of the generation that has been in love with the never-ending stories and stories like that. That makes me feel a little bit old, I have to confess, but it gives you that sense of a portal fantasy dynamic setting with high stakes, very fast pacing, and interesting and rich world building. This is about a young kid, is 14 years old, Jack from the title name, and he is swept away in a new world, and he has to face an immortal prince. This is the main villains in a world that has been devoid of all these supernatural abilities that were commonplace until quite some times ago. And what it makes it really interesting to me is that I have heard only amazing things about this book. all of the reviews that I have read, all of the booktube channel that have dedicated reviews or just mentioned this book, they say that it is incredibly fast-paced but also really satisfying, that effectively puts you in a rush towards the ending of the book, like almost like in a cinematic way, like you're reading, actually reading and creating your own action adventure film in your mind. And I think this is a really high praise, especially for debut novel. And I'm curious, really curious about what all the fuss is about. I wanted to try it for myself. This is just the first book that has been introduced in this world, because we have a shared universe with other stories that are complementary to this one. Because as far as I can tell, The Legend of Blackjack is a standalone, but then we have another series set in the same world, which starts with the crimes of Rooker Flynn, which is the first book in the Locke Institute trilogy. This is, as I told you, connected to that one, and I think those are secondary characters from The Legend of Blackjack that take center stage and become protagonists of this story, because the description of The Legend of Blackjack mentions pirates, and Rooker, this one, the protagonist of this story, is a pirate too. He's kind of trapped in a dark academia settings, a school that is also kind of a prison, because it says that the main drive of this story is him trying to escape this school, and it also talks about really dark atmospheres, high stakes, and nice pacing. And all the reviews that I've heard about this one, they say that this book and all the others in this trilogy, they exponentially becomes better and better because Witham becomes a better and better author, and he's able to deliver better stories with even faster pacing, but also they become much more satisfying. And given the high praise that I've heard about the first book, the standalone, and the high praise that I've heard about this first book in the other trilogy, I think that the third one has been published recently or will be published really soon. I have high hopes for this one, really high expectation, and I can't wait to see for myself how I land on, how the story works for me. And you should absolutely check it out for yourself. Now, let's talk about a series that has always felt like it was tailor-made for me. Since the first time that I've heard about this book, that I've seen the cover, I've always thought, I have to read this one, and I have to read it soon. But then life happens, and you know, you don't have always the time or the means to read everything you want. But it always kept that book on the back of my mind, and the idea of reading it always came back whispering to my ear because I felt this was going to be something important to me. And then I had the chance to talk to the author, just asking a quick few questions. If you remember, at the end of last year, I uploaded a video about my most anticipated books about for 2025, and I was searching for indie authors and trad-pub authors that were willing to share with me a little bit of their plans for 2025, and I asked L.L. Stephen, the author of this series, the Triempery Revelations, news about the rest of the series, because I want to ensure if the 4 books that we have here they were a completed series, or if we were expected to, were supposed to get more. And she was so kind to explain that yes, we will have a 5th book in 2025, and she also kindly offered to send me the entire series. And I said yes. I'm not gonna say no to that, absolutely not, because they all look amazing. You know, I am a design freak. I love to dissect the inner workings of the book covers that I own, because that's my background. I've been in graphic design for 20 years, and I'm an advertisement art director. And I will say, these covers are so spot on so atmospheric, and they gave you so much about the vibes of the story, which is about a post-apocalyptic and fantasy blend of a world where fallen gods machine had crashed on Earth, and the remains of those gods machine gave people and humanity supernatural abilities. So everyone is trying to catch those objects and those artifacts to gain power. There's political scheming. There's a young protagonist, which is the namesake Steradian, which will be incredibly influential for the development of the story. And yeah, it looks so fascinating, so big and so epic. And there's a reason why I felt immediately emotionally attached to this story, even if I have read just a couple of chapters about it. And I will show you why. And I want to shout out the author for being so incredibly generous, just not because she sent me the whole series that we have until now, all 4 books that are out, but because she also sent me a handwritten note and cards with illustrations. But let's cut to the meat and bone of the series. So the first book is this one. It's Steradian, which is the protagonist called Dorilian. I don't know exactly how to pronounce it. Let me show if I can make you look at this incredible cover the proper way. So you see here the city and this incredibly weird architectures, this machine probably here, and this should be the protagonist. And what made me tear up a bit was the a few words that the author said about in the introduction. There's a dedication for the book, and it says, "To Steve, for his undying support of my life's work." And I'm pretty sure it's referring to this book. And it must be nice to live in a family that unconditionally supports your writing endeavors. And it makes you also understand how important this story is for the author, and how much love and passion and effort has been put in the production of this one. And I also wanted to show you a little bit of cards about the big cities of this world building. There's also a description of how the city looks and works, and a little bit about the culture and the world building, and why this city is so important in the general setting of the story. That was the first one that I wanted to show you. The second one, I think this is probably my favorite cover of the bunch. This is the Celt King, Triempery Revelation Book 2. I don't want to read anything about the back of the book because I don't want to spoil the story. There's this beautiful ring here and this illustration. There's also a description here, but I don't want to tell you more. This incredibly nice crown. And by the way, all of those cards, they're all signed, so I feel so privileged and so lucky. And they all look very nice in the insides too, because of the internal design. And because, yeah, I have to tell you, there are many very good looking books that have horrible internal design. That it's a shame. It's a wasted opportunity when the book looks nice on the outside, but maybe the font that was used for the actual text, or the spacing in between lines, or I don't know, the way that the text was distributed was not optimal, was not the best it could have been. And I think it's kind of a shame, because it could have been better, and it actually makes the reading experience worse. So yeah, but this one is really nicely formatted, really nice, with a nice font, with the right spacing, with the right margins. This is the third book. You see that all the covers are really consistent and really give you an idea of the direction that the story is going for. I love this. I think this is a mix of classic digital painting, a little bit of 3D sculpting, and also photo bashing, keeping elements of architectures and real-life picture mixed with models and 3D models and digital paintings. There is a lot of works to get to this kind of detail and this kind of craftsmanship for this result. And I'm in awe of the result. We have a nice map here. Yeah, let me try and see if I can catch the right lighting. Yeah, I have shown this on my Insta, but I will show them better. They all look incredible. There's another card with another city. So yeah, this is the third book, the second stone. And then let me show you the fourth book, the last one that I have, waiting for the publication of the fifth installment. I'm not sure if the fifth one is the ending of the story. Godspear. You see there's a mountain here, and this mountain has horns. Why does the mountain have horns? This is really weird, but also really intriguing. It says that it will take a god to awaken a god. Why? Let me show another bunch of cards. Swordan. This half human, half beast thingy, warrior. And there is a book with gems. So this is all to show you, it's not to brag about this one, but well, maybe a little bit for all this series, but also to show you, to show the author how grateful I am for this incredible present. And because yes, this series sounds so amazing. I have heard a couple of reviews about the first book, and every time I show off pictures about this book or I talk to anyone in the indie book spheres, they all say yes, this is incredible, this is amazing, the story will crush you, will make you dream. And yeah, I can't wait to read it for myself and let you know what I think about it. And thank you, L.L. Stephen, for this incredible present. I'm so grateful. The Crown and Tide series by Michal Roberti. And I really love when the surname is Italian and I don't have to try and roll my tongue to say Roberti. And I'm pretty sure that the guy, it pronounces it that way. But the surname is Italian, so I'm going to say Roberti, okay? Sue me. This series is dark fantasy, maybe grimdark. It is about an invasion from a people from the sea invading a mainland, and about the political scheming and backstabbing and all the ensuing war that it comes from the original people trying to regain control of their mainland. And this one has great reviews too, and a bunch of really cool book blurbs on the back on the books. And we have two main books and a novella. And I'm not sure if the series is over or if we are supposed to wait for a third book. The first one is The Traitors We Are. The second one is A Grave for Us All. And then there is a novella called The Revenge of Thousands. And I have heard about this book a couple of years ago, of the first one, but I never got to read it. There's a bunch of people saying that yes, this is a very special, very good series. And yeah, I can't wait to read it. And I'll let you know what I think about it, and you should check it out for yourself. One of the best feelings, one of the biggest satisfaction that I selfishly gain by doing this, which means by scouring the internet, searching for new authors and new books, is when I actually find a new author which is new to me, that also has a interesting and consistent back catalog. So I stumble upon a book and then I find that this author has many other books and interesting series, and my eyes become heart-shaped, because I think, and I start a little bit salivating, thinking, wow, there's a lot of stuff here that is really interesting. And I got that guttural feeling when I heard about T. Ellery Hodges. I stumbled on this author because of another book, and I will get there in a minute. But while I was researching to see the description of that first initial spark of interest of that book, I discovered that he is pretty famous. He has a trilogy, which is called the Chronicles of Jonathan Tibbs, which is a genre blend of superhero, space opera, alien invasion. It is described as a mix between Buffy, the Vampire Slayer, and Inception. So I'm pretty sure there's no vampire in the series, but probably because of the quippy atmosphere, the witty dialogues. And we have 3 books in this series. The Chronicles of Jonathan Tibbs, we have the Never Hero, then we have the Never Paradox, and the Never Army. All of this book collectively, they have around more than 5,000 reviews around. It says that the book has sold thousands and thousands of copies, around 500,000. How it is possible that I have never heard anything about this one until I discovered his new and upcoming series that I want to read too. The other series is The Song of the Exiles, the first book, which captured my attention specifically because of the title. And remember, I knew anything, absolutely nothing about this author and his books. Is Bard Heart. And can we take a minute to appreciate how incredible, what a banger of a title. Bard Heart. He knows his audience. He knows, the guy knows his stuff. He knows this was becoming an instant bestseller, and he must buy immediately the moment that anybody listen to this kind of titles. Yeah, it's in my wish list, like that, in the snap of a finger. This is, of course, about a bard called Renly that finds himself become instrument or slave of a god that uses him to accomplish various missions until he's sent to a specific place to find a missing woman. And this is the inciting incident that opens up the world for him. The book is described as fantasy, epic fantasy at its best, with a rich and expansive world building, with misfits, a found family, ancient prophecies, ancient civilizations, a lot of mysteries, a relationship between Renly and his mentor, all the good stuff that makes epic fantasy the kind of genre that we all love so much. And the fact that on the cover we have this musical instrument, and the fact that the protagonist is a bard, that it also has this specific relationship with the god that uses him and manipulates him, but also gives him probably, I guess, specific supernatural abilities. It makes it so intriguing, so special. It is also a chunker. It is more than 700 pages long. So I want to know for myself what it is the deal with this story. And especially if you have an author that is actually stepping up the game, because you had, as I mentioned a little bit before, a really successful trilogy with thousands and thousands of reviews and a large fan base. This one looks like the moment when an author keeps all of that experience, all of the knowledge, all of that long marriage, churning words and publishing consistently novels, and he brings it all together to something bigger and better, even better than that really successful series, something huge that we are all going to love and maybe swoon about because of this, how big the scope is and how interesting it is. So yeah, I'm hyped about it, if you couldn't tell. I'm really pumped about it, and I can't wait to read it. Bard Heart. Remember, this is an incredible title, absolutely. I'm going to butcher this title and the name and surname of this author. I'm sorry. This is the Steradian Steradian Gate, the Steradian Gate. Okay, the book about the gate from Nathaniel Blevens. Blevens. This looks really, really interesting for me because it sounds like science fiction, but also a little bit fantasy and portal fantasy too. It is about the protagonist Ethan Burke that inherits a artifact that opens the gates to 5 dimension. So this is a multi-dimensional portal fantasy, portal science fiction adventure, and he is followed by a woman, which is the core protagonist, that is searching for her brother, for her missing brother. And when they cross the threshold from the first gate, they end up in a world that is hundred of years back, technologically speaking, and they're chased from a race that is trying to seeking control on those gates, I think. This is the basic setting of the story. I like multiverses, and I like when the universe, when you enter through those portals, are incredibly different from the original one, because they put the protagonist in a peculiar position. They don't not only have to try and solve the basic gist of the story, to find the MacGuffin or to fight the enemy, but there is also this really interesting dynamic of the fish out of water that is trying to adapt to a completely different environment, to try and learn really fast how to react to the various challenges and trials they will go through. I think it always works for me. That kind of dynamics always make the story really interesting for me. And yeah, I want to give it a try. I think this is the beginning of a series. And yeah, I can wait to give it a try and to let you know what I think about it, and you should try it for yourself. The Sundered Nation series, probably a trilogy. We have 2 books out. They've been written by Vaughn, Roycroft, which is an incredible person, one of the kindest human beings that you can imagine, and also a sub-judge colleague with the group, heralded by Philip Chase for the Spiff box of this year. It's been really nice to work and collaborate with him, and I had kept his series on my radar for quite a while, and I tried to catch the first book, but as you know, especially for self-published book, for internationally self-published book, if you're outside from the US or the UK, it can be tricky to get paperbacks. Ebooks, of course, are available they're really easy to get, but if you prefer reading on paperback, it can be difficult because distribution can be a little bit uneven. So I just asked for information. I asked Vaughn, I cannot find your book. I cannot find the first one. I think I had the second one was available. So the first one is The Severing Son, and the second one is Bold Ascension. But of course, I wanted to start with the first one, and I had the feeling that this specific series was going to be important for me, and I didn't want to just to read it and rush it on ebook. I wanted to have the complete experience with on paper, on the hard copy. And he was so kind to decide to send me the book, because there was no other way for me to find it. And it is a gorgeous book. So let me give you a look. The Severing Son, this is the first one, and I will absolutely try and get the second one, which should be available in Italy, but I'm not sure. But I'll probably try and buy it directly from Vaughn, because I want it signed like this one. So yeah, the book looks gorgeous. Let me see if we have the cover image is by Anthony Di Giovanni. It's a beautiful book. In front and on the back and the spine, the artwork has those watercolor vibes. So this story is about the protagonist is a woman, Elan, and it is about a prophecy, about a champion figure that should save her land from an invasion. And she never actually believed this prophecy about this kind of messianic figure until she stumbles on a guy the son of an outcast chieftain that fits all of the details of the prophecy and all of the description about this forthcoming champion, and she is tasked to protect him. And it looks incredibly detailed, the kind of story that comes from deep research with a great character development and a really believable world building. I specifically tried to stay away from any other details because I want to jump in a little bit blind. What I have in the description on Amazon is enough, and because of Philip Chase loving this book so much, especially the first one, I think Philip is going to read the second one in 2025 and giving high praise for the first one. I think it was his favorite for 2022 or 2023, I think. So I'm pretty sure we are locked in. This is going to be a success for me, one for me too, a win-win for everybody, and I can't wait to give you a review for this one because it looks absolutely incredible. And if you don't know, Vaughn has also a blog when he published reviews, and you should absolutely check out that one too. The Grim King Saga by Nick McPherson. This is also a Portal Fantasy Stories. There is a common ground today, a commonality about many of those books that I'm mentioning. This is about 3 kids. They will be called Chosen because they have incredible abilities that are really sought after, especially in one of the worlds connected with those portals. And you know, there is that trope of the reluctant heroes. They have to accept the fact that they're special. They have to understand how to use those powers, and at the same time, they're really scared of the consequences, and they have to try to survive. Because, of course, in that kind of story, when especially really young people discover those kind of abilities, they immediately they have to run. They get chased because someone wants to exploit those abilities. They look really interesting. I was a bit confused because the cover for the first book looked so different for the second one, and while I was chatting with the author, he decided to send me digital arcs for these books, so I'll probably give you a review pretty soon. They look amazing. I think this one went through a really successful Kickstarter too, so yeah, I will check it out pretty soon, and you should check out it for yourself. The Aesir Saga by C.K. Kesterson. I'm sorry, I'm butchering this title. Of course, you know, this is my brand, you know, this is my shtick. I destroy a title and then I try to make it look interesting for you, as much as interesting it is for me. This is a Northern mythology inspired, maybe also a retelling all of those atmospheres and legends. It is about a protagonist, Starkard, and the protagonist of the first volume that is called Heroes of Valhalla. It looks like that in the setting of the stories, in the newfound status quo of the story, Asgard it is set in the aftermath of a struggle that divided Asgard from the rest of the empire, and the city became a beacon of hope for the heroes. But at the same time, the gods have been destroyed, or they have abandoned the place. So there is this weird setting where the people are dealing with the consequences of this huge struggle, but there is also a dark threat looming at the horizon. And yeah, I like the fact that we have a modern reinterpretation of this kind of mythology, which is really well beloved, and it's been told in many times in very effective ways. But I like when new and up-and-coming authors are trying their hand in giving it a specific spin, maybe a peculiar and original spin. The cover looks really interesting. Book 1 is out, and book 2, which is called, look at me slaughtering another name, Shadows of Yggdrasil, maybe, should be out in May 31st, 2025. So let's give it a look and let you know what I think about it. There is also a novella set in the same universe, which is called Border's Dream. So plenty of stuff from this series. Let's see how it goes. You should check it out. The Four Treasures Saga, with the first book, Children of the Cold Moon. The author of this series was so kind to reach for me and ask me if I wanted to read the series, and I told him yes, it looks interesting. This is about a protagonist called Bran that gets pulled into the Celtic otherworld when he discovers that there is a great threat looming at the horizon, that he has incredible abilities that he has to learn to use, but it's also described as a story of self-discovery, when he of course have to understand how everything is it's working, and understand the world building, the dynamics between characters, but also to deal with the past. Something happened, that conditions that really affected the personality of Bran in the present state, and the author was so kind to send me a hot copy. And look at how good and how gorgeous the artwork is. Okay, I don't know exactly who the characters are. I think one of those would be Bran. Or is he the same person? Is he Bran discovering what's happening inside his mind? I don't think so. You know, the hairstyle is similar, so I can be justified in thinking this is the same person going on a self-discovery journey and having different color palettes. But they're probably two different characters. I don't know. I haven't started to read the series. But I like how it is designed, and I like the fact that we have a bunch of appendices and other information inside the book, explaining stuff about the world building. Oh no, these are family trees. Yeah. Tuatha Dé Danann family tree. Non-Fomorn family trees. And a beautiful map here too. So yeah, thank you. I think that this book is also connected to the podcast, because the author has this podcast called When the Longwinded one too, if I'm not mistaken. If you're watching the video and if you want to explain correctly how it works, let me know. I'm really curious to listen to the podcast too, to understand what's going on. Yeah, I will give it a try. Longwinded One Press, Longwinded One. Yeah, really interesting. Let's see how it works, and you should check it out for yourself. Real quick, reading updates. I am still in the middle of reading Heliotrope by Parman Pickering for my own enjoyment. I'm loving it so much. An Exile of Water and Gold by Joshua Walker. Morton Flux by Jonathan Weiss. And I also started Sleeping Words Have No Memory by Yaroslav Barsukov. I have an e-arc for this book, and I will tell you more in a couple of weeks, because I'm just at the beginning, but it already sounds really, really interesting and really well written. I like the writing style. It is really peculiar, but I'll tell you more really soon. And then I'm better reading other stuff that I'm not at liberty to discuss in details, but I'm enjoying myself immensely. It's been an amazing beginning of the year, but it was difficult to recover after the end of 2024, because I finished the year reading The Curse of the Mistwraith by Janny, and now let's get ready, because I'm going to give you really long, really detailed reviews about this book that completely destroyed me. Yeah, run for your life. If you've been around, you probably have seen my video about my favorite book of 2024. And this one, The Curse of the Mistwraith by Janny Wurts, was absolutely one of my favorite. And one that it was a life-changing experience. You see by the amount of tags that I have put in the book that it was a long experience and a formative one for me, because it took me a little bit. It was the kind of book that deserved unquestioned and undivided attention. I am the kind of person that has this habit to read multiple books, as I told you in my reading updates, at the same time, because my mind has this squirrel DNA embedded inside that I get distracted really easily. So focusing on different books, it helps me to, by default, get bite-sized reading sessions for those books, and I cannot get tired, and I can switch to something else if my mind is craving something else. But I couldn't do it exactly with this one, especially after the first act. After the first 30% of this book, I had to put aside everything else, because this is a book that has this fame of being really difficult and off-putting in a way, of being too difficult, because of the writing style, because the prose is so elaborate and so elegant and so different from what you're used to. You have to think this is a 20 years old book, but it doesn't sound like it is cut from the same cloth of what you had in that period of really that brought us really famous epic fantasy and fundamental epic fantasy books. This sounds completely and reads completely unique, because it is written in a very deliberate way to stand aside from everything else. Not plot-wise, not world-building-wise, but in the way you are encouraged to read it and experience it. Because the language is a language in and of itself. Because you have to learn a few new words, or words that can sound a little bit archaic, that are not part of our regular vocabulary, but you could say that happens every time you read a book. The authors can make a specific decision, a deliberate decision, to make the book extremely accessible with a very thin vocabulary to make it incredibly easy to read, or they can decide to give the book specific new words about a new language and to make you understand, to put you in a position to feel something about the vibes of the world, the atmospheres of the world building. Or they can decide that to push you in a different direction, straddling the line between tell, show, don't tell, or trying to infer a little bit of information and let you understand the rest. I think that Janny was here got to a point when she was able to give us a consistent amount of tell, clearly stating the state of things, pardon the use of words here, and at the same time leaving us free to infer a certain amount of thing and try to figure it out for ourselves. Because you have to think, you have to understand, this was planned as the beginning of a long series. Now, I don't know if when Janny started to write this series, or she pitched the series to the publisher, if she was already sure this was going to be an 11-book series, or if she actually hacked the system and it sold it as a trilogy or as a shorter series, and then she kept having deals for the rest of the series because she was selling it so good. If you had this long running of a series, it means that it sold consistently well all around the world. So it is really interesting on the editorial side of things, on the publishing side of things too, to see how a series carves a space for itself and then manage to stay on the market for so long, because the last one was published a couple of months ago, last year, a couple of months ago, yeah, more, last summer I think. So that's really interesting too. But let's talk about the general setting of this story. Let's get to the meat. We have two half-brothers that they're part of a prophecy to save the future of another world. So they're swept away in another world. There's part of fantasy too here, and there's a huge prophecies about what will happen at the world if they're able to do what they have to do. Actually, there are multiple prophecies and also conflicting prophecies, because they have the main struggle is about the mist. This world is covered in a mist that shields the world from the sun, but it is not to the point to devoid the world from life, because you still have the classic aesthetics of the medieval, maybe a little bit more Renaissance aesthetics, because if you have had the chance to see at the original covers from this book, because there was a huge shift in the artistic direction, you see this kind of illustration in the paperback are not the covers that you had for the first 5 or 6 books. In the art covers they have characters, and if you see what they are wearing, it doesn't look exactly medieval. It's like more Italian or French Renaissance. So it has this specific aesthetics which is really, really rich. So they're swept away, they end up in this new world, they have to find a way to liberate the world, to free the world from this mist. In this world you still have all of the classic organization of kingdoms and rich people and merchants and slaves and poor people, and the inner conflict that you usually have in a world like that, when there is a lot of kings and a lot of people trying to become more powerful and richer. But it is also a world that it's paying the consequences of being in that condition, of being covered and blocked from the sun. I think I'll talk more about it in a minute, that the mist has a metaphoric meaning too, aside the practical menace that it is inside the story. And it goes hand in hand in the themes that we'll explore in the story, but we'll talk about it later. I wanted to focus a little bit about the basic setup. As I told you, what I find really interesting is that we have actually different planets. And it is not that usual, even if in epic fantasy. You have it today. It is very common, for example, with Brandon Sanderson. When you have the Cosmere and all of those planets with different cultures, different magic systems, different characters. There is a connective tissues that connects all of those stories. But it is, when you talk about Portal Fantasy, you usually talk about different dimensions and different planes of existence. This is much more practical. Those portals, they work like stargates, okay? And when you cross them, you get to another planet, which is very distant from the original one. And it looks really different, because the planet when those two half-brothers come, if you see the maps on the website, in Janny Wurts' website, you actually have a wiki with different characters and the stories and the maps. You'll see that those kingdoms, those original kingdoms, they look like an archipelago system with many small islands interconnected. Instead, when you get to the actual planet, when the main story happens, it is completely different. It has a main continent with different kingdoms and cities and all the rest. The way this world is told, it is both really simple and also really complex. Because if you look at the story, the basic premise and what happens, if you try to summarize it, kinds of a straightforward stories. You have the two brothers, they have to learn to work together, and then a major conflict arises, and they have to trying to understand and to accept their difference, because those two half brothers, they have they're the last two of a very long running feud between two big families that had an incredibly hard feud between them. This hard struggled, centuries years old war between those two cultures. And when they are forced to stay in proximity and work together, they have to understand for the first time who they really are, because they have ideas and misconceptions, and there's a little bit of systemic ignorance about what they really are and how their culture works, because they've been in war for hundreds of years. And then something happens, there's a huge shift in the story, and the real conflict starts. And I'm trying to say no more about this because I want you to experience it for yourself. So the story is pretty simple if you look at it at the bird's eye length, distance. But then it becomes really difficult because of the layers of the world building. Because those two main characters are surrounded by 7 sorcerers, and then there's the politics around. Those 7s, a few of them are actual people that you can talk and touch, or flesh and blood. Others are dismembered. It means that they're kind in between life and death, but this can actually still influence very much the outcome of the story. And it was, for me at least, a little bit difficult to actually understand the mechanics of how those people were still alive, but at the same time not alive, but very much influential on the world, and still holding an incredible amount of powers. Especially one of those characters is so interesting for me because of the way he talks and because of a few consequences of his actions, and he wears the scars on his body. The way he talks and his demeanor is so fascinating for me, but I want to tell you more why. Okay, you have to discover it for yourself. And at the same time, the story becomes increasingly more difficult because of the influences of the prophecies. As I told you, there are different prophecies about those 2 brothers and what they were going to do if they were able to save, or supposed to be able to save the place from this mist that covers everything. But they have to deal with the consequence of actions and decisions that take place during the story. There is an interesting reflection to be done about the nature of this novel, because it is epic fantasy, but it is an epic story too. Without the fantasy element, if you strip it in and of itself, and you can make it a really interesting comparison with the epic stories that we have from ancient Greece, that worked in a very different way from what we know about fantasy stories and novels that have been canonized in a structure with comforting things that we immediately recognize with the Lord of the Rings and everything that we have after that, and modern fantasy too, because epic stories, epics, they work on a different ground. They have a pretty known outcome. They have characters that are foils for things to tell. They're symbols. They have specific roles. We know where they start. We know where they end. And agency, the ability to make meaningful decisions and shape up their life and their future, is a thing, but it is not that important because many of those stories are also tragedies. So we know how the story ends, and we know how it develops to tell us a specific message. In modern fantasy, we have a completely different ground, because the myth of the story is the way we see the characters making meaningful decisions and trying to change the outcome, maybe, and try to fight the prophecy, or actually accepting the prophecy and the consequence of the prophecy and trying to balance what they want and what they know they have to do to accomplish that prophecy. That's why in many stories, in many fantasy stories, there is a specific moment after the call to action. You know, the moment when the old mentor calls the protagonist and tells him, "You're a wizard, Harry." That's your future. When the actual protagonist goes through a conflict and has to decide if they want to become a hero, and it is a hugely important element of the story in fantasy stories in general, especially modern fantasy. I think the Curse of the Mistwraith stays in a constant conversation with epics and fantasy stories. It comfortably and really elegantly straddles the line between epic's need of protagonists that fulfill specific roles with a determined outcome, and the need and the desire of the author to give those characters a specific agency, to let them make their own decision that shape or reshape the outcome of the story. And that's exemplified really well in that abundance of prophecies that many of the characters of this story understand or don't understand, or they understand just a fraction of those, or they're trying to interpret them, because you have to know that those seven sorcerers, they can see the future and they can actually influence the threads of the timelines of this story. And the protagonist has to understand their roles, and they have to understand if they can actually decide for their future. And a big part of the internal struggle that they go through, it's because of that, to try and deal with the consequence of actions and decisions, and to try and figure out if they're actually free to take those decisions, or if it is everything already written for them, if they're caged in this exposition of things happening in this really long sequence of actions that are part two. And that makes it a really compelling, a really interesting exploration about our internal struggles, because we often have the feeling that things are happening out of our control, and that sometimes the decision that we make have no consequences at all. Maybe they come and bite us in the butt after many years, and at the same time we feel helpless and hopeless, because we struggle with the idea to trying to balance what we really want and what we know that we should do, what society is asking from us and social expectations, and what our families, our relatives, our peers are asking from us. And the constant struggle to try and understand if we were going to decide, if we want to desire, what we allow ourselves to desire will have negative consequences to the others. And I think it's been dealt really elegantly in this book. It was elevate a pretty straightforward story that becomes more complex and more complex. The more you see how the author is trying to put things that will be mysteries upon mysteries that will be probably unveiled in the rest of the story, and make it more of a philosophical story, more of a philosophical reflection about being human and being person that try to accept responsibilities, but at the same time have to chase a little bit of their own desires. One of the most fascinating things for me is the role of music in this story. And it is really moving, because one of those characters, one of those two half brothers, is a musician, and I really deeply love and deeply respect how all the other characters in this story see his relationship with music, how they realized that he is a genius. They're moved and they're in awe of his ability to play that instrument. And at the same time, they realize that if he accepts these responsibilities, if he accepts to be part of that prophecy, he has to renounce to live back in those sounding that instrument, because he gets the chance to become an apprentice and become better and better in sounding that music. But everybody in this novel understands that it will be a tragedy if he decides to renounce that, to just become something else, to become a warrior, to become a king, to become something else, and not become a bard and an artist and a musician. And it's really touching for me, because I come from a cultural background where art doesn't really factor in anybody's lifetime. Still in 2025, I have to explain people what it is to be a writer, how you can make your art a job too, but how does it work that you can actually write stories and make them something tangible, make them become novels? And the idea of of an entire world building in a universe where basically everybody understand how meaningful arts can be and how they can influence for the better in other people, and how they can shape for the better their life. It's incredibly touching for me. It's beautiful. It's something that made me love these stories much more, if possible, and made my appreciation and love for this author so much bigger. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is about the Mist in and of itself. I don't want to explain the mechanics of how it works and how it covers the world, because they are an integral part of the story, but the structure of the novel explains you pretty quickly that you should be that you should think about it on a deeper level. So the Mist is something, it is malevolent, it is really influential of the world, but it is used in the novel as a foil, I think as a metaphor to talk about cultural stagnation. Because it looks like that this world, where those who have brother landed, they're supposed to save, it lives in a constant coma. You'll see that, as I told you, culturally, it seems to still keep working. So the Mist doesn't work like the ashes falling from the sky in Mistborn, for example, where everything, there's only a specific kind of food still existed, where culturally everything was completely different from what we have in our world, because it was always so dark. Because food tasted different, because things worked in a specific way to make life keep working. No. In this world, you still have nobilities and workers and researchers, and you have those sorcerers. So it's not physically that much affected by the lack of sunlight, because it's not like you have always nighttime because of the Mist. You have less light, but you still have day and night. And of course, seasons are affected negatively because of that. And the moment that that is changed, you'll see it clearly stated in the book, the consequences of when the Mist has a different influence on the world. I think it's cultural stagnation because you can see that this world is really long. When the author talks about the ancient story of the book, of the cities, of the nations, he tells you this thing is 2,000 years old. This other thing is 10,000 years old. This tower, it was inhabited by unicorns and centaurs. I'm sorry, yes, centaurs. 20,000 years ago. But it all remains the same, or it got worse. The aesthetics of the place, the way countries and kingdoms and politics related to each other, they entered kind of a cyclical movement where, like a snake biting his own tail, when nothing changes for the better and everything remains the same, just getting a little bit worse after each year passing. And the fact that the old world building is that old, of course, brings other consequences, because knowledge becomes less and less about the supernatural abilities and the supernatural connection of the people and the world with ancient races that have become lost and that have decided to leave the world, especially those nations, behind. The details about that falling and how the Mist became that prominent of a present and had that kind of really bad influence on the world are left a little bit nebulous. I think we'll discover more in the next books, but the consequences on the culture are pretty clear. You have a world there that is really ancient, but it kind of stuck and remains all the same. And kingdoms and politics and politicians and relationship go through these cycles of conflict, peace, conflict, peace, conflict, and fragile, really fragile peace, until something really shakes up the fundamentals of this culture. And that happens when those two half-brothers, they become main players in the story. The character development is sublime here because it is really nuanced. They don't change completely. They remain pretty much the same how they are at the beginning, but they go through internal struggle. They make them much more aware of who they are. They're both adults at the beginning of the story. I think they're both around 23 years old one. The other one is around 26 or 27. So they're pretty young, but at the same time they have a consistent backstory. They've been through a lot already at the beginning of this story. So what they go through in this novel shaped them internally, but it doesn't turn them onto completely different characters. And I think this is really well done, really elegant, because you know, in modern fantasy it often happens that the authors put their characters in this endless cycle. When they do always the same thing, they they go through bigger and bigger stakes and more heart-wrenching things, trying to make them change or to become something else. It becomes exhausting. Here it is much more straightforward, but also much more gradual. You'll see that the person that those two main protagonists are slightly different at the end, but they're not completely different. And what they went through influenced them, but they just become more mature, more self-aware. And other things change for them that I don't want to mention because I don't want to spoil the story. So at the end of the story, for me, for the first one, this was an incredible experience. In a few moments it was like I was chatting about this book with another author. She told me, wait to get to the 50% mark of the book. It will be like learning a new language. And in a way, I think it is true, because it requires a high deal of attention, but it is really rewarding, especially when you read the last 150 pages. If you like the Sanderlands, you know, the end part of every Brandon Sanderson books, you will love the last 100 pages of The Curse of the Mistwraith, because there's a depiction of war, the mechanics of works, and the consequences of people on cultures and on the protagonist, that it is both spectacular and both incredibly heart-wrenching. It completely destroyed me. It took me 10 days to read anything else because it was so hard on an emotional level. But it was also a satisfying ending for this specific arc. There is a lot in the air, a lot of things that have to be resolved at the end of the book. You cannot read this one as a standalone, absolutely. You have to go on with the story because there is so much to understand. And a few things of the details in the inner workings of the story that I'm still really curious about. I want to know what's going on and what will happen. And yeah, I want to know more. I want to continue the series, and I want to say thank you to Janny to be so courageous, to be so brave, to write a story that it is at the same time so firmly planted in the convention of fantasy, and at the same time so original and so bold, so different and so complex. I really learned a lot by reading this book, and I hope that you give it a try, because it is incredible. It is deep, it is action-packed. Actually, it is a pretty slow burn, especially for the middle section, but at the beginning and at the ending there are so many epic action sequences, so great and so hard, hard hitting. Yeah, it's a masterpiece. Everybody says that this is the weaker book of the series. I cannot fathom how beautiful will be the rest of the series, and I can wait to read book 2 and probably the rest of the series. It will take me years. It will be a long time commitment for me, exactly how it is to read, how it was when I read The Expanse, how it is reading The Wheel of Time, how it is reading The Cosmere. But it is already a rewarding experience, and I'm pretty sure it will be an incredibly rewarding experience at the end. I'll feel as a different person myself when I finish to read those books. So if you haven't read The Curse of the Mistwraith, what are you doing? There is actually a buddy read on the Talking Story Discord server. If you want to share your experience with us, I'm part of that server too. You'll find me there. And check it out, this book. Read it for yourself as soon as possible. You'll thank me later. Now, real quick, remember that I am in the process of publishing my first novel, The Crimson Fire, the first book in the Conjure trilogy, and I'm sending ARCs, hopefully. Maybe it'll be a little bit late, but I'm trying to send ARC at the end of the month of January, of this month. If you want to read the book in advance, an advanced reader copy, just fill up the form that you'll find in the description of the book, of this video. I'm really eager to release this beast, this bad boy in the wild, and I'm really curious to see what you think about it. So if you want to read the book before all the others, before actually hits the market, just go down there and fill up the form, and you can subscribe to my newsletter too to get all the updates about my publishing journey and about my next videos. My first newsletter will be up at the end of the month, maybe at the beginning of February. Okay, thank you very much for being here. That's all I got for you today. This was a really long video. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for being part of this small community that is growing slowly but steadily. It is amazing. 2025 is already an incredible year reading wise for me, and I'm really proud of what we were able to achieve in this small channel. So thank you again for being here. Remember that if you enjoy science fiction and fantasy books, this is the perfect place for you. So if you want to see more videos like this, please consider subscribing, leave a like, share this video. But if you want to see more videos like this, more videos like exactly this one, and if you want to see the cover reveal for my novel, just look at this video right here, right now. Thank you again for being here today, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.